Hello and welcome back to From the Mason here on Artistic Echoes. We've seen a brilliant performance there from Charles Heathcote. I really enjoyed that, really entertaining performance. And now we're just going to chat to him a bit about the book and his other work as well. So, how's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been great so far. So, for people who don't really know you and haven't heard any of your works before, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so about 9 years ago, I first published the R. Doris book, which
Sure.
developed into a series of four books. I call it my trilogy of four because it was only ever supposed to be three,
Right.
but one of them got away from me, and they are cozy comedies set in the north of England, following the atomic housewife, Mrs. Doris Copeland, as she tries to heighten her status and her social standing. And about 6 years ago, I released the 5 years ago, I released the spin off book in a cozy crime series, which is An Heir to Murder. And then Shepherd's Delight, the poetry collection, is my latest release, which has been out for about a year now. Yeah.
Great. And have you always been a writer, or is it something you picked up recently?
No, it's I've always been a writer for as long as I can remember, simply because it was very cheap.
Okay.
And we were very poor, and all you needed to write was a pen and paper, and
Sure.
you could do it. So from being a young age, I've always written because it was just something that was always accessible to me.
Right.
And so it was a very easy thing to get into.
So did you study that as a degree, or was it?
Yes, I originally just wrote for fun and everything.
Yeah.
And then when I found out that creative writing degrees were a thing, I did go to uni to do that from 2010 to 13. Yeah.
And who have been some of your influences over the years?
Weirdly, it's not actually like writers of novels that have been my biggest inspiration when it comes to the writing of the like Doris books and the crime novels. Mostly my biggest influences have been writers of classic comedy. So the one that I always go back to is Alan Bennett.
Right.
For the format of the Doris books and the way they're written, I feel like he got language very well. Listen, for me, when it comes to writing, it's always about how it sounds. Whether it's a poetry collection, whether it's prose, it's always comes down to how it sounds and whether it sounds natural. And so if it doesn't hit the ear correctly, then I know there's something wrong. And I felt like Alan Bennett got that very well, alongside Victoria Wood and Roy Clark. And they're the three that I always kind of hold higher than most others,
right.
In terms of the writing of prose. And I'd say poetry-wise, that recently Seamus Heaney, especially with Death of a Naturalist, because it feels like we have a lot of similar themes that I have in Shepherd's Delight, although he did them a lot more successfully back in the 1960s. And also a really big fan of Sharon Olds, Simon Armitage, and Inouar Allams, who, again, everything they do, I just feel like they have a very interesting take on sound when it comes to their work.
So is poetry something that you've always written, or is that a new thing for this book?
No, it's it's all entirely the fault of Joy Winkler, who started the writers group that I attend.
Yeah.
And basically, the first poem that I read this evening, Ovine Gynecology, I wrote because there was a competition. And so I entered this competition and ended up longlisted. And then a few years later, another poem that in the collection that I didn't read got shortlisted for a prize. And over time, I was just writing these poems. And then Joy said to me, you should think about writing a collection based around the farm and your life from that background. And it took me 10 years, but I did eventually get it written. But it was never, at the time, a big focus. And as I said earlier, with the writing of Hay Fever and a few of the poems, I began to realise that I could write poetry. Right. And it also worked quite well with that thing for the sound for me. So it just seemed to be something that I naturally moved into as opposed to being the focus. And it's still something that I don't understand at all.
And how was it writing something autobiographical rather than fictional?
It was weirdly quite easy when it came to poetry.
Right.
I would never be able to do it like a memoir or something
Yeah.
like that. But when it came to putting it in the poetic form, there's, like they say, there is poetic license there. So while there are a lot of family stories in there and stuff from my own life in there as well, it almost felt like the correct way to tell the story, because it came out that way. It just, there was something so easy and fluid about writing it in that fashion.
Yeah.
That we're like, people have said to me afterwards about the fact that it is so, it exposes a lot, really, which I hadn't thought about before until the book was out and published. That people have said, you revealed a lot about your family there that I'd never be able to do. I was like, I didn't think about that until the book was out.
Right. So how did you decide what made it into the book and all those editorial things?
It was basically because, again, Joy has got the Poems and Pints evening here in Macclesfield, and from going to a few open mics and sharing things, so stuff that got a good reaction, I could kind of see, that has to go in the collection. Or sometimes I'd write something and think, yes, that definitely needs to be in there. And then sometimes I'd write something and think, it's not quite there yet. And unfortunately, some of them, there's probably about 30 poems that didn't make it in there just because they just didn't feel good enough, or I felt like I'd already discussed that theme elsewhere. So really, it was just what I felt was the strongest and what told the stories that I was telling in the best possible way.
So is it all like self-edited and produced and things?
The poetry collection was something more where I had edited it a lot myself. But with it also being a decade's worth of work, it was stuff where I'd taken it and workshopped it a lot. And again, Joy Winkler did a final look and was really my poetry editor of this one, and helped me figure out how to make the poems the best that they could be. And I had a few people read over it before, but a lot of the poems had been workshopped before and edited and re-edited before they made it into the collection. Because I hate editing.
Right.
It's the one thing that I can't stand about the writing process at all, is the editing. So I have to get somebody else in to come and look at it for me, because I would happily just, I would leave all my work behind. It'd never get out if I didn't have somebody edit it for me.
And have you had a launch night with this, and how did it all go?
No. This is the only book that I have never, apart from tonight, I've never held an event for. I think it's been one of those weird cases where I think because I've become so well known for the comedy and that sort of thing, I worry that people had come along and they'd have, like, I know it did happen to one person who had thought that the poems were going to be along the lines of Pam Ayres or something very comical because of what Doris had been. And then they read it. Their husband bought it them for Christmas last year, and they came to me a week later and said, "You put me off my Christmas dinner." So how could you write these things? How could you put them into a book? And it was that sort of reaction that I knew I'd get, that I kind of like stepped back and didn't do anything for. But I did just lie to you, because I did do an event for this book earlier this year, down at Mash Guru for Poetry Pandemonium.
Right. Okay.
And when I did that, and the reaction from that, I've now got a few events coming up at libraries based on the back of that, because I've realised I can go and share the poems with people. People might not necessarily like the subject matter, but there's generally going to be people there that are going to be supportive of it. And it has gone down well with the people that have read it so far, luckily.
So what have been some of your favourite performances you've done in the past?
I have, outside of the poetry, I think that some of my favourites, weirdly, are regularly to do with libraries. So I really enjoy going back to Holmes Chapel Library and Sandbach Library, because they've always had very big crowds and they've always had a very receptive audience. Even though I did once get into a tiny argument with somebody at Sandbach Library when they thought that I'd based a character on somebody from Coronation Street, and I'd never seen this character because I was born in 1992 and they edited the show in 1974. But that was just getting to share the books there. They seem to be very good at and understanding of the book, and the Doris books especially are very regional
Right.
to Cheshire. So it does take, I think, a lot of people around here who understand everything that's going on to properly understand them. But I did also do a author panel at Congleton Library a few years back, and that was one of those events that really just kind of makes you want to just be out all the time sharing your works with people, because just how receptive the crowd were, the questions that we were getting asked, it was a very enjoyable time. But yeah, most of my events are at libraries, so I'd say, yeah, it's the libraries. If they weren't being so supportive of me, then I don't think my work would be half as we're not good. What's the word I'm looking for? But you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't think half as many people would have seen the books as they have done.
And what's next? Is it another poetry collection? Is it another book? Is it?
It is the second in the Cozy Crime series that is currently with my editor. And originally I was going to try and get it out this year, but I decided not to rush it. And we're going to do a huge, it's never been 5 years set of events starting next February. Yeah.
And is there a plan? Do you do audiobooks as well, or things like that?
The entirety of Our Doris is available to listen to on YouTube, recorded by myself. Yep. It was a project 4 years ago when I was stuck in the house doing nothing. But otherwise, I would like to get an actor or somebody to come in and record the Doris books, because it is a lot of work, and I don't like work.
So when you're doing this writing, how do you normally go about writing?
It is entirely dependent on the book.
Yeah.
So Our Doris was written exceptionally quickly. Again, it's Joy's fault, because she had an event, an author panel at Knutsford Library. They wanted a male writer. She told them I had a book coming out. I'd got 4 chapters written. And so I had to turn up and lie to everybody that I had Our Doris coming out in summer 2015. And then I wrote the book exceptionally quickly in 1 month, got somebody in to edit it, created a cover and all that. And so that was just a very quick few days. Well, not few days, few weeks. And Air to Murder had a similar thing where I'd been writing it for a while, and then one day I just thought, well, I'm going to try and write every day this week. And I wrote every day, and then I ended up finishing the book in 3 weeks. But indisputably, Doris was written primarily from 11 o'clock in the night till 1 o'clock in the morning, because there was stuff going on at work that meant I had overtime most days. And so that was the only time that I could find to write anything. And so that was when that was written. But again, it's entirely dependent on the book, entirely dependent on what's going on. But I'd say that a lot of my writing nowadays does happen about 11 o'clock in the evening.
And is all of your work quite like conversational and people-based, or is there any other facets you do?
No, it's become a thing. That it has turned into this thing that everything I write generally is about normal people. And people have said to me now, when they're looking at it, they think that within my books it's finding magic in very ordinary things, or just somehow making ordinary things sound extraordinary. And I think that that's just what I gravitate towards. There have been, like in the past, I've written fantasy novels, and I am sharing one that didn't go anywhere 10 years ago on a Patreon page online, and it's something that I might do in future. But at the moment, all of the plans are very heavily based in the cozy crime novels, or I'm working on a charity shop novel, because I've been working there for however long ago 2008 was. So yeah, a lot right now everything is very much based on the ordinary and the normal. But that's not to say that in a few years' time I might not want to throw all that away and work on something fantastical.
Brilliant. Thanks for chatting to us today. Do you want to remind people where they can find all your things?
Yeah, well, the website is www.variousaltitudes.com, but you can mostly find me everywhere as Charles Heathcote. That's YouTube, that's Twitter, that's Instagram, that's Facebook. Look for me as Charles Heathcote. Just, if you're a tax man, goodbye.
Brilliant. Thanks for watching this episode of From the Microphone with Charles Heathcote. We'll be back in another couple of weeks' time.